Welcome, everybody. Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana, zerilli-marimò, for this very, very exciting evening. I couldn't be happier to have Joanna Clapps Herman here present her book with a formidable group of women by her side. She did it, but I'm so excited that she brought back on the stage many friends and wonderful colleagues, and I'm delighted that they're all here tonight to celebrate this accomplishment of Joanna. This book is about identity. And it's about identity in a way that is not very often addressed. But it's the fundamental questions that we ask ourselves. What am I? Am I Italian? Am I American? What makes me that? And Joanna doesn't give one answer. She opens more questions. And I think with her panels, they're going to send us home with even more questions. And that's their job. And our job is to come up with plausible answers for today's world. And it's not an easy job. But I think with their help, we're going to be on a good path to it. So again, it's going to be a very exciting evening. After me, it's going to be Joanna, and then one after the other. Yeah, the sequence, David all worked it out. And I was also delighted to see how, and reading Joanna's book, you understand it, the importance of the family, of the community. And this event, too, has been very much like that, with her family and friends and her son coming and helping and friends being here. It's an effort. It's a collective community effort. And I think that's another beautiful dimension that we are celebrating tonight. Without further ado, please welcome Joanna Clapps Herman.
Many, many wonderful people in this room, and I'm so grateful to all of you for coming without question. Ma Stefano, che galantuomo, the most gracious, truly, and always so generously welcoming and kind. And Julian and Kostya and all the other people who've been helping me, I'm so grateful. Not to mention my many friends who helped me organize the evening. And brought grapes and candies and sodas and tutta cosa. And so I'm very grateful. These women are my friends, my fellow writers, and my sisters, without question. The community that I've been welcomed into by these women and others, and George, my Italian brother, and many people are so important to me, without which I would never have written much. I was hiding in my corner by myself. But in addition, old high school friends, cousins, nephews, nieces. I'm so grateful that you're all here. It means so much to me. Especially mio figlio, Giacomo. Ma anche mia sorella Lucia, per piacere. Put your hand up. She's a major player in the book, and she's so important in my life, without whom. But to begin, we're going to go really expeditiously along here, and Michela is going to sing a beautiful song from Calabria about which she will tell you. Sweetheart, where do you want to just stand right there? Can you sit here? What's best for you?
Do you want me to stand on the stage?
Yes. I'm so grateful that she just offered to do this for us. Okay.
Joanna heard me sing this song a few months ago, and she asked if I would come tonight because she felt it was appropriate. This is a song, as she said, from Calabria, and it's a song that talks about love, familial love. It talks about belonging, it talks about loss, and it talks about reunion. The song is called Ciomparella, and that means young girl. but she's not a child, she's about marriageable age. And her mother has lost her. The mother cannot find her child, and she goes running up and down the streets, calling out to her neighbors, crying, "Have you seen my beautiful daughter? Where is she?" And the neighbors start to tell her things. And they tell her things like, "Well, I saw her going to church." Another neighbor says, "Well, I saw her pray to the saints." And we start to understand that she hasn't lost her daughter. Her daughter's probably run off to get married. At the end of the song, the mother says, "Well, when she comes back, we tell her that I was asking for her." So this tradition, these traditions were once an expression of community. And tonight we have this beautiful community that came and joined here for Joanna, so I thought maybe we could sing this song together. In addition, I have to say that for me, Joanna's writing has always been very participatory. If you're not familiar with it, this is not writing that you just listen to. This is writing that engages you and brings you in. And I have never forgotten the first time I ever heard Joanna read Coffee Ann. And I was right there. I was with your relatives. I was walking home with them arm in arm at night. And that's what her writing is like. So that's why we sing this together. So at one point in the song, different parts of the song, I will call out, "Oh bella, cioccarella di mamma ta." And you can answer me, "Cioccarella di mamma ta." And that means the young girl of her mother. The young girl belongs to her mother. Because Southern Italians are not related, no? We belong. So it's like, "Oh bella, cioccarella di mamma ta. Cioccarella di mamma ta. Piangi la mamma che perdi la figlia. Cioccarella bella. Piangi la mamma che perdi la figlia. Oh bella. Cioccarella di mamma ta. Cioccarella di mamma ta.
So there's one of the, of course, everybody please make sure phones are off. I always forget to do that myself. But I just wanted to say that the way we've decided to do this is what I asked my formidable cohorts here, is to choose a small selection to read from the book, some passage that meant something important to them or spoke to them in some way, and then to talk about it. So you won't have to hear me going blah, 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 blah. So, ma cominciamo la festa. Let's get this party started. And that would be with Edvige Giunta.
So wonderful to be here. I think we did our first Italian American event 21 years ago here at Casa Italiana. It was the presentation of Luis De Salvo's book, Adultery. And then Stefano welcomed us with open arms, and we didn't stop, we didn't leave. We were basically living here. It's wonderful to be back and wonderful to celebrate this beautiful work by the fabulous Joanna Herman. So I chose the opening essay that gives the book its title. Then I sweep the soft repetition of brush, brush against the hard surface. The sound and the motion of the broom makes a meditative moment. I seek out every crevice between pots, sweep, sweep. Sometimes I sweep more than needed, loosen a few more petals, tweak another blossom to make room for the new buds underneath. The gathered petals create a small pool of color. Each brush calls up in me anime di donne italiane, the spirits of Italian women. They flow into me with each sweep of the broom, inhabit me. Brush, brush, a whisper from woman to woman. All my Italian women are with me, Sicilian, Lucane, Calabresi, Abruzzesi, Napoletane, Pugliesi, join this convocation. They are in me, with me. Mornings, Mediterranean women sweep around their pots on their terrazzi, or in front of their doorways, around their plants. They bend to pick up a stray stem or stick or pebble from the ground, a bit of litter. They too are in their vestaglie. They too sprinkle water on plants, then throw some of the water on hard stone pavement, throw a rag down to the ground. The broom collects the rag in its bristles, then sweeps away the dark earth stains. Then they rest on their brooms, look off. All of this is real, something that lives in me. And I will confess that today, my husband is here to witness. As I read this aloud, I wept. So these are a brief response. Teresa Carmela Sant'Angelo irons an endless pile of Jesus' shirts in Nancy Savoca's Household Saints. Sandra Gilbert does laundry in the river Styx, evokes the kissing of the bread before discarding it. In Tina de Rosa's Paper Fish, Carmolina's mother sculpts the green hair of the strawberries, leaving a pink, bald spot where the green hair was. We find such smell-tender, devotional moments of the quotidian made epic in the exquisite prose of Joanna Herman's last book, When I Am Italian, Quando Sono Italiana. In the opening essay that has the book's title, the repetitive, mundane act of sweeping the terrace is slowed down, followed closely, broken into its tiny, perfect components. It embodies the holy poetry of gestures. Sweeping the terrace is a chant that conjures up not simply an Italian self, but an entire community of women. It's a bridge to a tribe of women lost and found in the crevices of memory, the author's own memories and their fellow women's. When I'm Italian breaks down barriers of time and space and brings the ineffable and yet solid sensory experience of being in Italy, of Italy, into the New York City terrace, where this modern-day priestess prepares for these arcane rituals, slipping into plastic mules and draping her body with a vestaglia, the quintessential robe of older Italian women. I wanted to wear a vestaglia here tonight to honor Joanna and their women, our women. The solitary domestic space of the terrace opens, expands, surrenders, fills with the power of ancestral bonds. The body remembers, the body creates. Rituals are necessary. For years, Joanna Herman has been showing readers that we make rituals and they make us. Simple gestures of a communal, archaic quotidian are scattered like petals in this glorious essay. Quote, brewing coffee, snapping string beans, mending with good small stitches, tugging just so with each stitch, cutting the bread toward my breasts. Unquote. Sweeping the terrace is the solitary act that transcends itself so that one woman feels in her bones that she's many women. Sweeping the terrace tethers us to lost rituals and lives, emerges community and self. It's a grateful offering that partakes of the devotional quality of processions. But this religion is the religion of the house, the domus, the oikos, and the women, the goddesses. It's nostos, homecoming through language. Carol Bonomo calls it the shelter of the alphabet. I have been finding shelter in Joanna Herman's writing for a quarter of a century. And I'm always struck by her archaeological determination to peel the layers of what's before her eyes and reveal a palimpsestic enterprise of voices and stories. Lyrical, yes, but also epic, the epic of the domestic. She understands intimately that Penelope's weaving and unraveling is not pointless. It has purpose, it has art, it is art, like sweeping the terrace, or snapping beans, or mending. This prose does not take us back to another time, another place, another people, donne del Mediterraneo. It leads us to them by transporting them here. Crossing and recrossing oceans and terraces, Joanna's prose sings to us, and we close our eyes in rapture. Thank you, Joanna.
Yes, hi, I'm Maria Laurino. Hello. Ciao, ciao. Oh, thank you. I met Joanna, I think almost 20 years ago when I was writing my first book, Were You Always in Italian? And we have been in conversation ever since. And then I had the wonderful pleasure of Eddie and Nancy, and recently Marianne, and just continuing this wonderful conversation of what it means to be Italian American, and particularly what it means to be an Italian American woman. Our stories have not been told a lot in the culture, and thank goodness for people like Joanna and Eddie and Nancy for doing this. So I am reading, actually Nancy and I are both reading from the same essay that is just wonderful and struck us both deeply, and I had a reaction to an early part of the essay, so I'm going to start with that. It's called After the Manner of Women, My Italian Mother, which we all have, our Italian mothers. My mother often told the following story. My daughter, is Lucia, you went by, not Lucia, right? I've asked you that. My daughter Lucia was engaged to be married to this young man. His name was Jory Squibb. My mother always lowered her chin at this point and looked out from under the hint of an overhang of her very pale eyebrows. Then she went on in her small, solemn voice, "They were from Michigan." She meant they were American. They were different from us. They had money. Naturally, I had to meet this family. At this point, she adjusted herself in her chair so that her listener would have time to consider the obvious weight of her dilemma. So I called his mother up, and I said to her, "Mrs. Squibb, I'm Rose Clapps, Lucia's mother. Our children are going to be married, and I would like to have you and your husband come to dinner at our house." Now, I had to do this because it was only right. I was the mother of the girl. The mother of the girl has to have the parents of the young man to her house. But I was very, very nervous. I mean, she was Mrs. Squibb. If she were at home telling this story, my mother would flutter her right hand toward the blue cafe curtains she had sewn, washed, and starched herself. She'd give a backhand wave to the candy dish on the counter next to the rip mappin. How do you say that in dialect? Mappin, thank you. You see, I don't have that dialect. What can I say? To explain the difference between her way of life and the life of Mrs. Squibb. If she were not sitting at the kitchen table, she would say hesitantly, at a loss to explain it, "Well, we are who we are." I was so nervous that I was actually sick. She would clear her throat. I mean, I couldn't, we weren't in her league. I didn't know what to do. How could I have her to my house? I had to, but I couldn't, just not. Then I decided. My mother always took a deep breath at this point, to have the pleasure of resolving it again to her satisfaction. She would be Mrs. Squibb, and I'd be Rose. My sister Lucia decided she wasn't going to marry Jory in the hours just before the bridal shower. Auntie Ag, her godmother, gave her at Mecca's, our favorite restaurant, to have the abiz pizza. Abiz. What kind of Italian am I? When we didn't make it ourselves. But it was too late to cancel the shower. Lucia had to live through it. So that night we ate upstairs in Mecca's new private room, a classy Southern Italian feast. It was the early 60s, so it was the first shower I'd ever been to that didn't take place in a living room filled with chairs borrowed from our families. The Mrs. Squibb and Rose dinner never took place. It's my mother's "I'd be Rose" that gets to you. She knew her place. She'd be herself, but not presumptuously so. Not a Mrs., just a Rose. I've had my conflicts with my mother, but you have to love her for that story. Isn't that what all of us are struggling for most of our lives? To be Rose, only who we are. I thought of that story after the first time I met Simone. Simone, you could say, was Mrs. Squibb to me. Bill and I had been invited to teach at the University of Turin for one semester. Simone had been assigned as our host, an elegant, educated, poised, northern Italian woman, una torinese pura. She was Torinese and Torino was Simone. When I thought about this, I thought about this lovely observation that Proust has made about reading, where he said, in reality, every reader is, while he is reading, the reader of his own self. The writer's work is merely a kind of optical instrument which he offers to the reader to enable him to discern what, without this book, he would perhaps never have experienced in himself. And the recognition by the reader in his own self of what the book says is proof of its veracity. And I think Joanna really gives us this gift, and this is the conversation that we're talking about, that we are in dialogue with her, and we respond so strongly this way. And so, yes, I had my moment, my Mrs. Squibb moment, when I read that passage, and my Mrs. Squibb moment were the Middletons. As Joanna explores, yes, I'll get to the Middletons. They were a lovely couple. I don't mean to say, they seem so old to me. I was a kid. They were probably younger than I am now. But as Joanna explores what it means to be an Italian American, she allows us to explore for ourselves. And as I said, this particular passage reminded me of this couple. They were this very waspy couple. Mr. Middleton knew my father from his work. My dad used to work at the Allied Chemical Corporation. And my father, I was always told by my mother, could pass for English. And that was a very, very good thing in our house. My father, with this quiet and dark-haired and green-eyed, and perhaps because he was so quiet and so not what a stereotype of the time of what the Italian would be. This is what people used to say. So Mr. Middleton took a kind of liking to my father, and they would come and visit, and we would be horrified. Maybe they only came 2 times, but it left this imprint on us because it looked as if everything we were doing, they were looking at in just such a way. And I felt this very strongly in this Joanna's mother, and writing to this family and wanting to do the right thing, but constantly negotiating, this negotiation of self in face of the larger the larger American culture. And in fact, we were so terrified by what the Middletons would think when they came to our shabby house, because we did have a shabby house, that it became a common refrain in years. Every time we acted in a way that just seemed a little too Italian, we'd look at each other and say, what would the Middletons think? So what Joanna is doing in this opening of this wonderful chapter and throughout her time in Turin is showing us the very difficult place it is for the Italian American, because it's not only about negotiating who you are within the larger Italian culture, within the larger American culture. It's about also negotiating who you are within the larger Italian culture. And you begin to understand that your relationship to Italy is a very, very important part of the dynamic. And Joanna feels very at home in Italy. She loves going to Italy. She writes about Italy beautifully. But in the north, particularly this very French city of Turin, you got to watch your step. And you are going to feel like the outsider. You're going to understand that in Italy a classism exists, which particularly back then, before Italy faced a migration of immigrants and refugees, it was a classism that bordered on racism. Joanna gives a lovely description of Torino, and I just wanted to read that to you because I could not describe it as eloquently. Torino was clothed in the solemnity of its past, worn like an exquisite but understated dress, hand-sewn in a couture salon of a previous century of a fabric that simply couldn't be created again. This dress would have been detailed with beads, tiny tucks, infinitesimal stitches made for a European courtly grandmother in dazzling youth. Although she came to be known only as a staid, upright grandmother, the dress of her early beauty of the room she encountered and devastated. It's no coincidence that Elena Ferrante makes Turin the location of her second novel, The Days of Abandonment. Her protagonist, an educated woman from Naples, very similar to her protagonist in the Neapolitan novels, lives in Turin. And she is there while her marriage is dissolving, and these volcanic emotions that she can't contain in this very staid, closed environment is so much a part of the fabric of that novel. And here, Joanna experiences her own version of this when she and Bill have been asked to teach. This fraught relationship with the city and its people is developed through her friendship with this woman. Is it Simone? Or is it Simone? Simone. Who's an elegant but sometimes arrogant woman. And she comes bearing gifts, beautiful, elegant gifts, and Joanna does not quite know how to reciprocate. And it's this constant negotiation of what does she think of us, how are we seen? This constant negotiation of the Italian American asking this in the face of American culture, will you come to our house for dinner? Can we be American like you? And coming to this in the face of Italian culture, the culture of the North, when we are mostly Southern Italians. But I'm going to leave it at that because Nancy is going to continue with these observations.
Okay, hello, I'm Nancy Carnevale, and thank you. Very, very happy to be here for the rollout of Joe's really beautiful and rich and moving and very funny, as we have heard, book. I'm following up from where Maria left off. So Joanna meets Simone before she actually goes to Torino, and it's over lunch with the families on the Upper West Side. And a lot of the anxiety that she has about meeting Simone is precisely that, she's aware of the difference between North and South, and she's concerned about what Simone is going to say when she finds out that Joanna's family is Southern, and also that a cohort of her relatives in Italy went north to Torino to work in the Fiat factory. So here is Joanna speaking at first. My family is Italian. But no, Where are they from? Simone asked, relieved to be on ground that could only please us both. All of my grandparents came to America from Lucania, also known as Basilicata, one town called Tolve and the other is called Avigliano, both about 20 kilometers from Potenza. I'm proud, Joe says, that I can say Avellianese, Tolvese, that I can use kilometer, that I can say dalla regione di Basilicata, or alternately uno lucana with the right penultimate accent, even if my Italian is mostly only good enough to travel with. Oh, hesitantly then, really? Simone looked down and away to her left. When did they come? Well, they came during the great immigrant wave at the turn of the century. First, my grandfather, who went back and married my grandmother and then left. She had a baby, Archangela. She built her own house and waited for my grandfather to come home, but he didn't come home. My mother's family had been cheesemakers. My father's family had been blacksmiths and then iron workers. And then this beautiful description. Artisanal skills were the pride of these parts of our family. I pictured my grandmother's arthritic hands deep in hot, salty water, kneading the fresh cheese, stretching it into long plates above the water, twisting it, squeezing the water from it, then submerging it again to knead it again. I could taste the fresh, still wet cheese crisscrossed with hatching from the twigs woven into its basket. I could see her hands molding the cheese into little birds, pigs, cows. On Amsterdam Avenue, sitting with Simone, Federico, and Chiara at popovers, our food had arrived while I thought about my grandmother's dark spotted hands submerged underwater to work the cheese. Then my eyes found Simone's manicured nails, elegantly poised to cut Chiara's hamburger into bite-sized pieces. I chatted on, determined to make Simone see my pride. Most of the family stayed in the South, although much later on in the 60s, some of my cousins went to Torino to work in the Fiat factory. Oh, Simone said, in her flat, certain tones. That was a terrible time, really terrible. Before that, Torino was so small and everyone knew each other. But that really changed Torino when those people came. It gets better. Your people ruined our city. Our city was pure before they came. We were all Piemontese. We were all the same. There weren't others. It was so wonderful before they came. She looked at me directly, clear, without apology. My prattling stopped. The loud hum of vibration inside began. I've read that passage so many times, and it's always that part about, how Simone says it, without apology, as if it was a matter of indisputable fact. It's a devastating detail, and Joe is really a master, I would say, of the devastating small detail. If I didn't know that this really happened, I know this is a memoir, right? Joe has told me about Simone. If I had read this scene in a novel, I would really have thought it had to be made up. So perfectly does it express the North-South tensions that have complicated Italian Americans' relationship with Italy, and so with their own identity as a people of Italian descent, whether in the US or when they return to Italy or whenever they interact with a real, that is, Italian-born Italian. How to lay claim to an identity rooted in a country that never wanted you, that saw you as an other, because politically and culturally, Italy has been the North. This othering of Southerners in Italy predates the 60s. I'm coming at this as a historian, so I'm sorry. This othering of Southerners in Italy predates the 60s. It even predates the era of mass migration to the US. And it had consequences, not only for Southern Italians who went to work in Northern Italy in the post-war era, as Joanna's family did, but also for those Southern Italians who immigrated to the US from the turn of the last century and until well into the 20th. In those early years, US officials and Americans in general, by and large, accepted the North's negative views of the South and Southern Italians. Distinctions were drawn in the US between immigrants from the North and those from the South, with a clear preference for Northern Italians. This in a period when Due to the pseudoscience of the time, it was widely believed that different peoples could be arranged in a hierarchy from desirable to least desirable immigrants. Among the immigrant populations in the United States, Southern Italians ranked near, if not at the very bottom of that hierarchy. The creation of an Italian-American identity, as Maria touched on this too, has also been complicated by the class divide, which comes through so clearly in the meeting here in that scene between Joe and Simone, a divide that continued to influence Italian-American identity even as later generations became educated and left the working class in greater numbers. Social mobility does not erase the immigrant working class past, and ultimately the largely peasant origins of Southern Italian migrants who constituted the bulk of migrants to the US. How to claim that past with pride, how to incorporate it into one's identity is another critical issue that this essay and Joe's book overall makes us think about in its exploration of what it means to be Italian for those born outside of Italy. Thank you. Thank you.
How lucky am I to have these brilliant women?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Ann McDonald Carolan. And I want to thank cara Joanna for inviting me here at the presentation of her latest capolavoro, When I Am Italian, Quando Sono Italiana, despite the fact that I'm neither a creative writer like these women here, nor am I clearly Italian American. My bona fides is that I teach Italian American culture and cinema in particular, and I was lucky enough to be teaching last semester here at NYU when I had many a lovely late lunch, early dinner with my dear friend, whom I've only known for about 5 years. But I've been lucky enough, and this is the generosity, I'm going to be speaking a little bit today about the generosity of spirit that I think Joanna Clapps Herman embodies. So I'm not Italian American, and I'm not a creative writer. But Joe and I do share a wonderful editor, Mr. James Peltz at SUNY Press, and we share as well a birthplace, that is Waterbury, Connecticut. Now, how many people here are from Waterbury, Connecticut? Okay. How many people who aren't from Waterbury have ever been to Waterbury? Oh, right. And you've all been through it on Route 84, right? And you know Holy Land, USA, which thank goodness has been resuscitated a little bit. So, proudly named the Brass City, the once indomitable center of manufacturing on western Connecticut's Naugatuck River, drew many different immigrant groups eager to make a new life and earn a living here in the United States. And if you want to stop in Waterbury, you can visit the various Catholic churches, the Italian, Irish, French, Polish, and Lithuanian. I'm forgetting Russian. I'm sorry, some French, Canadian, St. Anne's, right. These churches remain a testament to the immigrant population, which was Catholic. So I think, for me, and I'm fourth generation, the latest to come is my paternal great-grandfather. My mother's side, it seems like they've been here forever. But I'm 100% Irish American, married to an Irish American. That means my children are 100% Irish Americans. And I was struck in reading this book, which I didn't get my copy, and I wanted to read it, so I read it on an airplane. And it got me all the way over to Los Angeles in PDF form, and I couldn't wait to finish it. So I highly recommend the book. But it struck me how different my experience as an assimilated at least fourth generation American was from, because I was really American. I mean, I was I still am of Irish extraction, but I thought of myself as an American. And I think this collection of essays gives us a sense of what it's like to inhabit that liminal space between the old world and the new world, between Italy and America. So today, I'm going to read an excerpt from The Grief Estate, which is in the final section of Joanna's collection. In her essay entitled Voglio bene, Jo writes of the enduring power of a present from her mother, with whom she had a fierce bond, to put it lightly. Now, the expression volere bene means to love something in the non-romantic sense. And this expression, which differs from the verb amare, demonstrates, in my opinion, the nuances of the Italian language. And if you want to rewatch Moonstruck, you'll see the terrible mistake when Cher says to her father, ti amo. It's like, oh, mamma mia, so you block that. It's a great movie, and I teach it too. But I always say, oh gosh, to my students. Okay, so Voglio bene, like so many other stories in this collection, reveals the generosity of spirit with which Jo describes the many gifts, both material and emotional, received from family and friends throughout a lifetime. And Jo's prose places the reader squarely in a certain time and place. And for me, this evocative tale of loss and rediscovery, of resistance and love, resurrects so many powerful memories of time spent with my own mother when we went downtown Waterbury. So, and you remember you got dressed up for that. Just saying, right? And you'll see in this. So to mark her graduation from high school, Jo's mother wants to buy her a cross, which of course is laden with Christian symbolism. And I'm going to read. This is Jo's mother speaking. I want to buy you something special. No, I'm sorry. I want to buy you something special for your graduation present, she said, elated by her own good idea. I'm going to buy you a gold cross, and I want you to go with me downtown so that you can pick out the one you'd love. I was elated too. Gold, a cross, a jewelry store, shopping with my mother. All of it filled me up. We took the bus from our house downtown to Bobby's Corner at Bank and West Main Streets, then crossed to stroll up Bank Street, mother and daughter, in ceremony and pleasure, in unison for this brief afternoon. I was to choose my own gold cross. My mother's instincts were right. She was buoyed with her idea, and I was lifted beside her in this pleasure. If my mother and I were often then at odds with each other, still I knew she was a model of decorum and social graces. She fit easily into her elegant suits and white gloves. She shopped downtown with a savoir-faire that could have easily have belonged in New York or Paris. My mother stopped and chatted with several women as we walked up Bank Street towards Michael's jewelry store. Even I had to recognize the way these women were happy to stop and talk to my mother, her warmth and sweetness with them, everything I both admired and didn't have. This is my younger daughter. She turned to me as if we'd never had a bad word between us. She's graduating Crosby High this year. None of these women were as well dressed as my mother in her high heels and sweeping skirt. I could see they admired her elegance and sophistication. They were happy to be included in her circle. It was the same at Michael's Jewelry, where it was, "Rose, how lovely to see you." All that day, my mother was at the height of her confidence. She was poised and benevolent, an important woman in her town. The jeweler met her grace with his dignity, happy to lay out the crosses he carried one by one. I'm sure we looked at many before one singular cross was carefully placed on the black velvet display pad. Crosses are made of two narrow rectangular planes, one longer than the other, intersecting. These intersecting planes are an opportunity for all manner of designs and imagination. Vines and lines, jewels and draped gold. The original was simple, the hanging body of Jesus on the cross rendered so iconically as to be almost an abstraction of the sacrificial figure. Jesus' long, slender limbs are a graceful display of torture. People who haven't grown up with the cross tell me how upsetting they find the image of a man crucified, but most of us were raised with it to see it in all the ancient narratives of sacrifice and divinity. Jesus, the sculptural embodiment of Isaac on the altar. The cross that Joe chooses is unadorned, elegant in its simplicity. And I continue reading. Unembellished to the point of sheer grace, it was the one I chose. "Are you sure that's the one you want?" my mother asked. "You're sure?" I think she was ready to spend more money for something more elaborate, but she saw my instant passion for its simplicity. The purchase of that cross was a moment of détente in the long wars between us, a pause and a blessing. So sometime between the time Jo leaves for college at Boston University and her move here to New York City, she loses her cross. And it's at a tag sale when the family decides to move out of their home that proves fortuitous. And I'm reading here now. At the end of the day, we'd made a little more than $400. My mother asked me one more time, "Jo, are you sure you don't want these beautiful suitcases? I paid so much money for them." I knew she had, a gift from my mother, but it was the 60s now, and a set of heavy suitcases just didn't belong anymore. I didn't have the space for them in my small studio apartment, and now neither would my mother. But one woman happily paid what my mother was asking. The pieces still looked brand new. As the woman was bringing her new luggage to her car, my mother, in her typical annoying way, said, Wait, let me run my hand through the side pockets inside." I turned to her to say, "For God's sakes, Mom, there's nothing there." She was laughing with girlish delight when her hand came up out of the suitcase's small side pocket. The delicate chain of my elegant gold cross was dangling from her hand. The cross, my cross. I have had many a comeuppance with my mother, especially since she died. She had an obsessive way of keeping every single receipt for every single piece of furniture or household good she ever bought. All of the receipts turned up for the designer furniture suite that was too modern for our young taste. Now her grandchildren love it, as well they should. It's quite smashing. After she died, I found my grandfather's passport that I'm sure I would have thrown away in one of my sweeps. She held on to many things that I've come to treasure that I had once tried to tear from her hands to discard. Thank goodness she resisted me. I have my cross, that cross. It's the one sitting on a silver tray where I keep special pieces of jewelry. It's still elegant, still a gift from my mother. Thank you.
So you see how, is this good? Is this, honey, loud enough, or should I stand over there? There's two of them here. Should I try the other one?
Maybe for the audience, if you're taking questions?
No, I'm going to tell a story now.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to tell the story. Obviously, you can see how grateful and rightfully I am grateful for all of these women. It's commentary and I knew it was a good idea to have them, and I'm so pleased with myself. Maria. So, and Diego, anche. Oh, mamma mia. Okay, so this whole question, right? Am I Italian? Am I American? I refuse Italian American. I just refuse it. It's not for me. It's not a name that makes sense to me, and that's basically because that's not how we talked about ourselves. And to me, the real is the way we talked about ourselves. We knew we were American, but we called ourselves, but we also knew we were Italian, and we said, "Oh yeah, what are you? Oh, I'm Italian." That was the 40s and 50s and early 60s. That's the way we saw ourselves. So then came the moment when my sister was going to Italy to meet up with said squib, who was doing some kind of work in the south of Italy, in Basilicata, no? Well, in my family, if somebody's gonna go buy a quart of milk, well, you better go with her. I mean, you can't go by yourself anywhere. So, okay, oh, Joe, well, Lucia's going, well, you better go with her. And I was like mystified, like, really, me? Going to, what? No, but okay, we're going to Italy. And my grandmother realizes and explains to us that we are going at Ferragosto, the middle of August. This is the high, holy holiday season in Europe. This is when Europe stops and goes to the sea. You stop what you're doing, you stop work, and it's an incredibly important moment. I think it was originally the Ascension of Mary, wasn't it? I think that's the holy day that our culture, in pagan times it was another holiday, but, yeah. Right?
The Feast of August.
The Feast of August, yes.
The Emperor Augustus.
Yes.
Feria.
Ah, anche.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
The
you.
Christians took it and then
Yeah,
delivered it.
sempre, right? Okay, so these two, I have to admit, American girls get on the plane, and I remember my sisters said to me when they brought around, I mean, this was the 60s, 64, isn't it nice that they don't ask you if you want dinner, they just bring it to you? That was how inexperienced we were, and this was our first trip out into the world, right? So,
no, it's standing in the light.
well, honey, I can't see. I can't see. Peccato. Momento. I'll go back in a minute. In any case, we fly into Ferragosto. Oh, and because we're going, then our grandmother explains to us, well, you're going to the south of Italy. It's Ferragosto. You have to go to Tol. You have to go to my hometown. This is the feast of San Roque. Now, San Roque is our saint. He belongs to us. And he is that classic saint that is carried on the shoulder through the streets, and all the money is pinned to him, and all the gold-plated ex voto pieces, and all the ritual, all the medieval ritual you conjure up in your head, it is living there. But we don't really know that. We just know that Grandma says you have to go. So, okay. So this is what we do. We get on the plane to Rome, then we get on the plane to Naples, and then we get off and we take the train into Potenza. Our very first day. We arrived in Potenza about 10:30 at night. We have sent a telegram from our stopover in London to tell them that we are arriving. And when we get off that train, we think our family is going to be standing there waiting for us. Because if they had known we were coming, believe me, they would have been there 10 strong. But there is nessuno. There are many passengers quickly being greeted by their loved ones, being hugged, oh, Carmelina, vieni qua, kisses, hugs, running into cars, other people streaming into the buses that are streaming out of the train station. And we're standing there looking around. What are we going to do? We don't know. Potenza is very high up. And even if you know what you're doing, it's almost impossible to get up there. There are escalators, and I mean, it's just a strange city in that way. But at that point, all we know is it's up there, and we're down here, and this station is emptying out. And we look at each other. We've done this before, screwed up our entrances, and we always think, in those days we always think, oh, well, I guess that's the way it was meant to be. That's what we would always say to ourselves. So Lucia, because she's older than I am, feels, well, she better be the leader here. So she says, I'm going to go talk to those people and see what they say. And they say, you better get up to Potenza and spend the night in a hotel. How are we going to get there? They don't know. We don't know. And they get in their cars and they leave. Then 2 young men, good-looking young men, come over to my sister. Oh, ma che è successo? Who are you? What can we do? So Lucian comes back and tells me they have offered to drive us to Tol.
They told us they were the mailmen.
Moment.
Sorry.
Un attimo. Another story ruined by an eyewitness. So, I mean, this is how flustered and confused we are. Lucia tells me, they say they're the mailmen, and they have to bring the mail up the Tol now. Okay. Well, what are we going to do? We get into the back of this tiny little vehicle with kind of, sort of a car, sort of a truck. But of course, there are 2 doors and no back doors. And we are in the back. And we begin to leave Potenza and switch back up these country roads. I mean, dark. I mean, there is nothing. And we say, ma dove? Dove? 30 chilometri. Okay, we barely speak Italian. We have about 3 words between us. Okay, and then we'll finally, oh God, we see some lights up on top of the hill. We say, Tolve, queste è Tolve. No, c'è un'altra, and the name of a town. Okay, that's not 12. Then that hilltop disappears, and we switch, and we switch, and we switch, and another hilltop. Queste è Tolve. No. So, I mean, we have no idea where we're going. We have no idea what their intentions are. And we just don't know what to do. But comes a certain moment, we must have passed, 4 or 5 towns, that then would disappear and we'd be back in the dark. When, I know this much, I know enough Italian to know that when they start singing the song, ma queste ragazze, and I don't know what else they're saying, but they're saying, they're singing a song to pretend they're talking about us. And I don't know what they're saying. I just know they're talking about us. I know enough to pull out my hat pin. Do not ask me what I was doing with a hat pin, but it was long and it was sharp. And I show it to my sister. And we're squeezing each other like this. When the next thing that happens is they pull over to the side of the road. And the young man in the passenger seat says, we say, ma che fai, che fai? Ho bisogno. Ho bisogno. I have need. Well, I don't even know if this is still true. But I was taught in my Italian classes at BU, ho bisogno has several meanings. And which bisogno is it? I say, no. No. Non è possibile. No. My voice begins to rise in pitch, just like my grandmother's. And I say, non è possibile. Back in the car, get back in the car right now. And they're looking at me, like I am screeching, and I have my pin ready. And I'm not sure why, but he gets back in the car. And I say, my uncle is waiting for me in Tol, and my grandfather's waiting for me, who's dead. There are so many of my relatives waiting for me in Tol. They're all there. They're all waiting for us to arrive. Anyway, They tolerate this, and eventually one of the lit hilltop towns is actually Dol. So this dark, dark, dark road, we come to the edge of Dol, and some of us here know these festivals really well. By now it's midnight. But guess what? You can't even begin to walk down the street, much less drive down the street. This town is rocking. It's Ferragost, it's Santa Roque. You literally cannot move through these streets. And there are no cars involved in 1964. Maybe there's one occasionally that comes from another town. And they're honking on the horn. Nobody is paying them the slightest bit of attention, not even a little bit. They just look at them and shrug and go back to eating their ice cream, talking to their friend. And inch by inch, we literally have to go inch by inch through the town. And eventually they begin to roll down the window and to say, these two American girls are here, and they need to find Vito Santorsa. Vito Santorsa is my grandmother, Lucia Santorsa's brother, who does not know we're coming. But he does, we find out he lives at 10 Via Roma, across from the Chiesa, from San Roque. So we inch our way through, what, mezz'ora? 3/4 of an hour, approximately. They move out a little bit, but mostly we just, and finally we get up to Zivit's house. And we get out, and these young men, who now somehow have turned and changed, they're ready to deliver this precious package. Suddenly, the mood has changed radically. And they get out, and my Zivit comes. I want to just get out a piece of paper, because I'm going to read the last two paragraphs in a moment. And I just need to get that page out. Not get right. What did I do with it? Maybe I'm not. I don't know what I did with it. Oh, it's up here. I know where it is. It's up here. Okay. So Zivit comes out, and he has on the classic dark corduroy suit with his fedora on, with the vest, with the shirt buttoned to the top, no tie. And he has stubble, and he looks just like my grandmother, of course. And he comes out and they say, here are two American girls that have come to visit you. He looks at us. We're out of the car by now. And we get out of the car and we say, you are Vito Santorsa, sì? And we say, siamo le figlie della figlia di tua sorella Lucia. We are the daughters of the daughter of your sister Lucia. And I will read. He looks at us, his eyes squinting in confusion, then widening in surprise. He's stunned. We stand staring at each other. Seconds of silence follow as he gazes at us without a word, trying to cross years of absence. His eyes cloud, then water. Then his arms stretch out to gather us to him. His voice is grainy, and when he says, as he hugs us, le figlia della mia sorella Lucia, he is our Zivit, rumpled, fedora on his head, his neck collarless, the fold of his face covered in gray stubble. His eyes are the same color as Grandma's, and we know we are not in America. We know we are in Italy. We are involved at the Festa di San Rocca at 10 Via Roma, and we are the daughters of the daughter of his sister Lucia, and we have arrived. siamo arrivate. So as you can imagine, it was an extraordinary visit. But, okay, we are going to take a few comments or questions, or as you like, and I think especially to ask my beautiful sorelle. And then we'll go upstairs and drink some wine and have some sfogliatelle and some grapes and confetti. And if you want to buy a book, brava. But if you don't, also brava. So, would people like to ask a question? And who is it who's going to hand the mic around if we do that? She has it. Okay. And here's another one. For the panelists. Yes. So, nobody wants to say something. Come on, in this crowd of. Va bene, Lucia.
Sorry, grazie. Okay. So, in hearing this, Joe, and you tell it so beautifully, and it was just that way. A detail occurs to me, which is that there was one phone in the town. It was in the bar.
Right. You're right.
And you had to make an appointment. They would go to the bar and say, my family's going to call at 3 o'clock on Sunday. They would go there. We would go up the farm, and we would make the call, and that's how they communicated. So in my memory, they knew we were coming. They just didn't know exactly. They knew we were coming to
I don't
call,
think
but
so,
not
Lucia. Why was he so
exactly when.
shocked?
Well, he didn't know. I didn't experience him as shocked, but anyway, they didn't know when, because we couldn't then.
I think they didn't really. I disagree with you. I'm back.
Yeah, but
I think the telegram had never arrived,
But the phone, there was this one phone.
Yes,
and it
no,
was
that you're right.
1964. There was, as Joe said,
One
there were no
phone.
cars. There were only donkeys.
Chooch.
Chooch, and the one phone.
Chooch,
it's
come on,
hard
a lot,
to
chooch.
believe.
Our
Hard to
parent-
believe, but it's
Yeah, that's true.
It was biblical. It was.
It was biblical.
And there was
yes.
opera playing
Oh, I
in the
forgot to
square
say.
when we got there. Yeah.
Yeah, there was, opera was, not that anybody was listening to the opera, but there was an opera on a raised platform. Now, I know we're a bunch of chiacchierons, so come on, people.
I have a comment
Yes.
while people think about their questions. We have an exhibit upstairs.
Yes.
And by coincidence, I think it's an exhibit that perfectly complements your book and your Turin experience. But first of all, or you might know that Turin was the city in Italy that for the American government signaled the limit between Italians white and Italians non-white. So, Torino. So basically, nobody who came here qualified as Italian white because Turin is very high up in the north.
And that was the limit.
So that's one first footnote for Turin. Second thing, we had as our visiting professor here an Algerian writer, Amara Lacous, who moved to Italy and first to Rome, and then from Rome he moved to Turin. In the meantime, he had become an Italian citizen. When he had to transfer his residence from the city of Rome to the city of Turin, he goes to City Hall, explains what he has to do, and they tell him, go to the Ufficio Emigrazione. He says, I'm an Italian. And they go, it doesn't matter. You are from somewhere else. So eradicated, so rooted in Turin was the culture that immigrants were by default other Italians coming from somewhere else. That even if you're Italian, you still go to Ufficio Emigrazione when you move from anywhere else in Italy to Turin. But the exhibit upstairs is a different story. It's an exhibit of drawings by Carlo Levi.
Oh, yes.
And many of you might know that he is the author of Christ Stopped at Eboli, a beautiful memoir that he composed while he was in internal confinement for being an anti-fascist from 1935 to 1936 in the small town of Agliano in Basilicata. And Carlo Levi, who was a physician by training, who came from a family of the high bourgeoisie of Turin. His father was an important physician. His mother was the sister of the founder of the Italian Socialist Party, and therefore he was left-wing, progressive, wrote about being on the side of the poor and the peasants, he had never met peasants before in his life. And really being in Agliano and being in Basilicata is his life-changing experience, where he really gets to know the peasants and the people that he has always thought he would be fighting for. And when he's there, he realizes that, yes, he's going to be a painter because that's what he wanted to do, despite his degree in medicine. But he cannot not tell the story of these people, and he puts it down in this beautiful book that is still available in print here, and Christ Up the Table. It's a memoir with a very personal recollection of his encounter with these peasants and with these people that seem to live in a world where Christ never arrived. That is still within like an archaic past where beliefs that predate Christianity are still alive. And the paintings that we have upstairs, the drawings that we have upstairs, belong to a very short period in the time of Primo Levi that after the war wrote the memoir, became very famous for it, and continued his political activism, his painting. And he had eye problems. He had a retina detachment. So for about a year, he was in a hospital having surgery, going almost completely blind. And these are the paintings, the drawings that he did because he didn't want to stop drawing and writing for one day, even when he was in the hospital and almost blind. So I think it's very fitting that they're drawings by a Torinese that goes to Basilicata and gets it. And this is a testament also to his creative impetus. He felt that he had to write, he had to paint, he had to communicate what he felt inside him. So I think it's a perfect bringing together of all things. So please take a look at it while you're upstairs with the great sfogliatelle.
Yes, we're so far south that we are exile in Italy. We actually represent that. You go into exile when you come to us. So come on, nessuno? Maria.
I do have 3 stories.
Bene.
Well, I don't know if I could speak with this thing.
Yes, you can.
I can? All right. So to what you were saying about how... so I come from the South, and I married a Northerner in New York City. We both came from Italy. I was 12, he was 14. And we are both Italian, but from very different cultures. He's Piacentino, Piacenza, which is about an hour from Milan. And I'm from Militello, Catania, which is like almost in the bottom of the volcano Etna. So 2 very different things. So 2 things that I...
Keep it close to your mouth,
okay.
baby.
When I got married and we went on a honeymoon to Italy so that we could meet our relatives, when I went to Piacenza, beautiful, beautiful people. Emiliani are just amazing, amazing people. But I can't tell you how many said to me, "Where do you come from?" "I come from Sicily." "Oh, you don't look it." And they were saying it so sweetly, you know, I don't know. So, you know, but it's funny that years later I thought of this and said, wow, you know, I guess I didn't look Sicilian to them. And it was a nice thing for them. I don't know. I don't know. So that was one. Now, in contrast to that, my mother, of course, Sicilian and, you know, purely from generations and generations. She did not know Northern Italy. She would call the Northern Italians polentoni because they always ate polenta. We did not eat polenta, and so that's what they called them, I polentoni. But not in a nice way either. Yeah. But when I met my husband and we decided to get married, so it was, you know, it was a very big thing because, you know, my mother did not allow me to go out. We had to go out at a certain time, come home at a certain time. Every time there was a lecture, whenever we got back, and you're never going out again, you know. So finally, you know, I said, you know, we want to get married. So she said, well, where does this guy come from? So I said, he comes from Piacenza. She says, I really would have liked you to marry an Italian. in sheer contrast to what we're saying, the Northerners, yes, looked at the Southerners in that way, and I still experience it. But so do the Sicilians look at the Northerners as naso in su, and the whole bit. And they still,
Naso in su.
but it's the truth. So in my third story, so being that I am an immigrant, I guess.
Yes.
I guess, even though I've been here since I was 12. And like you said, when someone asks you, you're Italian. But the interesting thing is that for an immigrant, when you leave Italy, in America, you will always be an Italian to the Americans. And when you go back to Italy, you will always be the American.
Yes. Yes.
You lose everything completely.
Yes.
So you identify with both. I mean, my children are American and wonderful, and I love it here, and wouldn't be any place else. But when I go to Italy, they still say l'Americana. And I'm saying, well, I'm not Americana. I was born here. You're not like us anymore. You went.
That's
you
the
left.
permanent dilemma, I think. Yes.
So we really, and as you said, the phrase Italian American is an American thing.
Yes.
There is no such thing as Italian American. My son is American, but he has he grew up with an Italian culture.
Yes. Yes.
And I am Italian by birth, but I think in English. So it's a very interesting.
It's wonderfully complicated, Maria. I think it's okay. Yes.
Too much.
No, darling. Thank you. Yeah.
Piggyback on what she said.
Yes. Please.
My sister and I went back to Sicily in September. She hadn't been there in 32 years. Literally, we pulled into the area in front of the church and to get out of the car and unload. And my sister did not even put her foot out of the door, and we hear, "Le americane sono arrivate." And my sister turns to me, she goes, "How the hell do they already know?" And luckily, they were relatives of ours who were coming out of the church. But we had such a laugh because they already know. And we come from a very little village, so they knew we were coming. But the coincidence that we didn't even get out of the car, and so Corsa said, "Le americane sono arrivate." And my sister was in shock at the comment.
They know it's in the air. They pick it up off of the air. I think we should go drink some wine and eat some sfogliatelle.